You know, they say, a mother's love is unconditional, but what happens when that love isn't returned? What happens when the very children you die for decide you're better off dead? Well, I'm here to tell you that sometimes, just sometimes, life has a way of turning the tables in the most unexpected ways. My name is Margaret, and this is the story of how I went from being discarded like yesterday's trash to watching my own children crawl back on their knees, begging for my forgiveness. It all started on a Tuesday morning in March. I remember it so clearly because it was the day my world completely fell apart. I was 73 years old, living in the same house I'd called home for 45 years, the house where I'd raised my 3 children as a single mother after their father walked out on us when they were just babies. Sarah was my oldest at 52, followed by Michael at 49, and my youngest, Jessica, was 45. They were my pride and joy, my entire reason for existing. That morning, I woke up to find all 3 of them sitting around my kitchen table, looking like they were attending a funeral. My funeral, as it turned out. Sarah, always the spokesperson of the family, cleared her throat and looked at me with eyes that held no warmth, no love, just cold calculation. "Mom," she said, her voice flat and businesslike, "we need to talk." I poured myself a cup of coffee with shaking hands, already sensing that whatever was coming wasn't going to be good. "What's wrong, honey?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Michael shifted uncomfortably in his chair, unable to meet my eyes. Jessica just stared at her phone, pretending to be busy with something important. It was Sarah who delivered the blow that would change everything. "We think it's time for you to go into a home," she said, sliding a brochure across the table toward me. "We've already looked into it. Sunset Manor has an opening, and we can have you moved in by the end of the week." I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. "A home? But I'm fine here. I can take care of myself. I don't need—" "Mom, you're getting older," Michael finally spoke up, his voice lacking any emotion. "You had that fall last month, and you forgot to turn off the stove twice this week. We're worried about you." The fall he was referring to was a minor stumble in my garden. I'd scraped my knee, nothing more. And yes, I'd forgotten about the stove, but who hasn't? I was hardly losing my mind. "I don't want to go to a home," I said firmly. "This is my house. I've lived here for 45 years. I raised you children here. I'm not going anywhere." That's when Jessica finally looked up from her phone, her eyes cold and calculating. "Mom, you don't really have a choice. We've already talked to a lawyer. Since you put the house in our names 5 years ago for tax purposes, we have the legal right to make this decision." My blood ran cold. I had put the house in their names, thinking I was being smart, thinking I was protecting their inheritance. I never imagined they would use it against me. "You can't be serious," I whispered, but the looks on their faces told me they were deadly serious. Sarah leaned forward, her voice taking on a patronizing tone. "Mom, we're doing this for your own good. You'll be safer there, and you'll have people to take care of you. Think of it as a new adventure." "Adventure?" I laughed bitterly. "You're throwing me away like I'm some broken piece of furniture, and you're calling it an adventure." "Don't be dramatic," Michael said, finally showing some emotion, though it was irritation rather than compassion. "We're not throwing you away. We're making sure you're taken care of. By people who don't know me. By strangers." I could feel tears threatening to spill over, but I refused to let them see me cry. "What about taking care of me yourselves? What about visiting me here? What about treating me like I'm still your mother?" "We're busy, Mom," Jessica said, her attention already drifting back to her phone. "We have our own lives, our own families. We can't be checking on you all the time." busy. That word hit me like a slap across the face. I thought about all the times I dropped everything to help them. When Sarah went through her messy divorce, I'd watched her kids for months while she got back on her feet. When Michael lost his job, I'd given him money from my savings to keep his family afloat. When Jessica had her second baby, I'd moved in with her for 6 weeks to help with the newborn and her toddler, but they were too busy for me. I sacrificed everything for you 3, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. I worked 3 jobs to keep a roof over your heads. I went without so you could have school clothes and Christmas presents. I never remarried because I wanted to focus on raising you. And this is how you repay me? Oh, here we go with the guilt trip, Sarah said, rolling her eyes. Mom, that was your choice. We didn't ask you to sacrifice anything. Those words cut deeper than any knife ever could. I stood up slowly, my legs feeling like they might give out beneath me. Get out, I said quietly. Mom, Michael started. Get out, I screamed, surprising myself with the force of my voice. Get out of my house, all of you. They exchanged glances and Sarah had the audacity to look annoyed. We're not going anywhere, Mom. We need to discuss the logistics of your move. That's when I realized they weren't just suggesting I move to a home. They were forcing me. And there was nothing I could do about it. The next few days were a blur of pure hell. They brought in people to pack my belongings, deciding what was essential and what could be donated or thrown away. 45 years of memories reduced to 2 suitcases and a few photographs. They sold my furniture, my car, even my mother's china set that I'd treasured for decades. You won't need all this stuff, Sarah said dismissively as she supervised the removal of my dining room table, the one where we'd shared countless family meals. The home has everything you need. I felt like I was disappearing, piece by piece, as they dismantled my life. The house that had been filled with laughter and love became cold and empty, just like my children's hearts. On the day they moved me to Sunset Manor, none of them even bothered to help me settle in. They dropped me off like a package, promised to visit soon, and left me standing in a sterile room that smelled of disinfectant and despair. The first few weeks at Sunset Manor were the darkest of my life. I barely spoke to anyone, barely ate, barely slept. The other residents tried to be friendly, but I couldn't bring myself to engage. I felt like I was already dead, just waiting for my body to catch up with my spirit. My children kept their promise to visit, technically. Sarah came by once a week for exactly 30 minutes, usually on her way to somewhere else. She'd sit on the edge of the visitor's chair, checking her watch and making small talk about the weather. Michael showed up every couple of weeks, but he spent most of his time on his phone, taking business calls and acting like he was doing me a huge favor by being there. Jessica came by once a month, if I was lucky, and usually brought her kids who would run around the common room while she gossiped with the other visitors. None of them ever asked how I was feeling. None of them ever asked if I was happy. They'd inquire about my health, make sure I was taking my medications, and then leave as quickly as they'd arrived. I started to understand what it meant to be truly alone. But then, something unexpected happened. I met Ruth. Ruth was my roommate, an 80-year-old woman who'd been at Sunset Manor for 3 years. Unlike me, she'd chosen to move there after her husband died, wanting the companionship and care that the facility provided. She was everything I wasn't: optimistic, social, and determined to make the best of her situation. "You know," she said to me one evening as we sat in our shared room, "feeling sorry for yourself isn't going to change anything." I looked at her, startled by her directness. "Excuse me?" I said, "Feeling sorry for yourself isn't going to change anything. You've been here for 2 months. and you've done nothing but mope around like a lost puppy. Your children treated you badly, I get that. But you're not dead yet, Margaret. You still have life left in you." Her words stung because they were true. I had been wallowing in self-pity, waiting for my children to realize their mistake and come rescue me. But they weren't coming. They'd made their choice, and now I had to make mine. "What do you suggest I do?" I asked, genuinely curious. Ruth smiled, the first genuine smile I'd seen in months. "You start living again. You find purpose. You show everyone, including yourself, that you're not done yet." That conversation changed everything. Ruth became my mentor, my friend, and eventually the sister I'd never had. She introduced me to the other residents, encouraged me to participate in activities, and slowly I started to come back to life. I discovered that I had a talent for organizing events. Within 6 months, I was running the social calendar for the entire facility. I started a book club, organized movie nights, and even convinced the administration to let us start a small garden in the courtyard. For the first time in years, I felt useful, valued, appreciated. But the real transformation happened when I met Harold. Harold was a retired professor who'd moved to Sunset Manor after his wife of 52 years passed away. He was intelligent, kind, and had a sense of humor that could make me laugh even on my darkest days. We started as friends, bonding over our shared love of books and our mutual frustration with the facility's bland food. But slowly, something deeper developed. "You know," he said to me one evening as we sat in the garden I'd helped create, "I never thought I'd feel this way again." "What way?" I asked, though I suspected I knew what he meant. "Happy, content, like I have something to look forward to." I felt the same way. For the first time since my husband had left me all those years ago, I felt truly connected to someone. Harold saw me for who I was, not who I used to be or who I was supposed to be. He appreciated my intelligence, my sense of humor, my strength. He made me feel like a woman again, not just a discarded mother. My children, meanwhile, continued their perfunctory visits, completely oblivious to the transformation happening in my life. They saw what they expected to see, a sad, lonely old woman warehoused in a nursing home. They never bothered to look deeper, never noticed that I was thriving. About a year after I'd moved to Sunset Manor, Harold proposed to me. It wasn't a grand romantic gesture. We were both too old for that kind of drama. It was simple, practical, and perfect. "Margaret," he said as we sat in the common room after dinner, "I know we're not young anymore, but I'd like to spend whatever time I have left with you. Officially. Will you marry me?" I said yes without hesitation. The wedding was small but beautiful. Ruth served as my maid of honor, and Harold's son from California flew in to serve as best man. Several of our friends from the facility attended, along with some of the staff who'd become like family to us. It was everything I'd never had in my first marriage: joy, love, celebration, and the feeling that I was exactly where I was supposed to be. My children, of course, were invited. Sarah came, but spent the entire ceremony looking mortified. Michael sent his regrets, claiming he had a work emergency. Jessica didn't even bother to respond to the invitation. "Are you sure about this, Mom?" Sarah asked me after the ceremony, her voice dripping with concern that felt more like judgment. "I mean, you barely know this man." "I know him better than you know me," I replied. And the truth of that statement hit us both like a physical blow. After the wedding, Harold and I were moved to a larger room designed for couples. We settled into a routine that felt more like a real marriage than anything I'd experienced in my first go-round. We read together, took walks, played cards, and talked for hours about everything and nothing. We supported each other through the inevitable health scares that come with age, and we laughed together almost every day. I was happy, truly, genuinely happy. But life, as I'd learned, has a way of throwing curveballs when you least expect them. It started with a phone call from a lawyer I'd never heard of. Harold had passed away peacefully in his sleep, leaving behind not just a grieving widow, but a substantial inheritance. Apparently, my late husband had been much wealthier than he'd let on, and he'd left everything to me. Everything. The house he'd owned before moving to Sunset Manor, his investment portfolio, his life insurance policy, even a small vacation cabin in the mountains that he'd bought years ago but never mentioned. All told, it was worth well over $2 million. Suddenly, I wasn't just Margaret, the nursing home resident. I was Margaret, the wealthy widow. The news of my inheritance spread quickly through the facility, and then somehow it reached my children. I suspect one of the staff members mentioned it to someone, who mentioned it to someone else, and before I knew it, my phone was ringing off the hook. "Mom!" Sarah's voice was bright and cheerful, more animated than I'd heard it in years. I heard about Harold. "I'm so sorry for your loss. Are you okay? Do you need anything?" I was still grieving, still trying to process the fact that the man I'd grown to love was gone, and here was my daughter, who'd barely acknowledged my marriage, suddenly concerned about my well-being. "I'm managing," I said quietly. "Well, I've been thinking," Sarah continued, her voice taking on that familiar, calculating tone. "Maybe it's time for you to move back home. I mean, you probably don't want to stay at that place now that Harold's gone, right? It must be too sad, too many memories." Home. She was talking about my house, the one they'd forced me to leave, the one they'd sold 6 months after I'd moved out. "Sarah," I said slowly, "you sold the house, remember?" There was a pause. "Well, yes, but we could find you a nice apartment. Or maybe you could move in with one of us. I know Jessica has been talking about how she'd love to have you closer to the grandkids." Jessica, who couldn't be bothered to visit me more than once a month, suddenly wanted me closer to the grandkids. "That's very kind of you," I said, not bothering to hide the sarcasm in my voice. "But I'm fine where I am." "Mom, you can't be serious. You're living in a nursing home. You have options now. You have resources. You could live anywhere you want." "Anywhere I want." The irony wasn't lost on me. When I'd wanted to stay in my own home, they'd forced me out. Now that I had money, suddenly I had options. Michael called the next day, his voice warm and friendly in a way it hadn't been in years. "Mom, I heard about your situation. I'm so sorry about Harold, but I'm glad you're going to be financially secure. Listen, I've been thinking about our conversation a few years back about you moving out of that place. I think it's time." Our conversation. As if it had been a mutual decision rather than them railroading me into a facility against my will. "Have you?" I asked. "Absolutely. In fact, Rebecca and I have been looking at houses. We found this beautiful place about 10 minutes from us. Perfect for someone in your situation. It's got a nice yard, close to shopping, and we could check on you all the time." Check on me, like I was a pet that needed watching. "Michael," I said, "I appreciate the thought, but I'm happy where I am." "Happy?" He sounded genuinely confused. "Mom, you're in a nursing home. How can you be happy?" How could I explain to him that I'd found more happiness in the past 2 years than I'd had in the previous 20? How could I tell him that the people at Sunset Manor had become my family, that I had purpose and meaning in my life, that I discovered who I was when I wasn't just somebody's mother? Jessica's call came 3 days later, and it was the most transparent of all. "Mom, I feel terrible about how things have been between us," she said, her voice thick with what sounded like genuine emotion. "I know I haven't been the best daughter, and I want to make it up to you. Why don't you come stay with us for a while? The kids would love to have Grandma around, and I could really use your help with, well, everything." Your help! There it was. Now that I had money, I was suddenly useful again. "What kind of help?" I asked. "Well, you know, Tommy's been having trouble in school, and Emma needs someone to drive her to dance class, and David's been working so much lately that I'm basically a single parent. I just thought maybe you could help out. We could pay you, of course. Whatever you think is fair. Pay me to be their live-in babysitter." "Jessica," I said, "I raised my children. I'm not interested in raising yours." The silence on the other end of the line was deafening. Over the next few weeks, the calls continued. They came separately and together, sometimes bringing the grandchildren to tug at my heartstrings, sometimes bringing spouses to add weight to their arguments. They painted pictures of the wonderful life I could have if I just left Sunset Manor and came back to them, but I wasn't fooled. I knew what they wanted, and it wasn't me. It was my money. The final straw came when they all showed up at Sunset Manor together, unannounced, with a wheelchair and a suitcase. "Mom," Sarah said, marching into the common room where I was playing bridge with Ruth and 2 other friends, "we've come to take you home." I looked up from my cards, my heart pounding with a mixture of anger and disbelief. "I beg your pardon?" "We've found you a beautiful apartment," Michael said, pulling out his phone to show me pictures. 2 bedrooms, a full kitchen, a lovely view of the park. "It's perfect for you. And it's only 5 minutes from my house," Jessica added, as if that was supposed to be a selling point. "The kids could come visit you all the time." I set down my cards and looked at my 3 children, really looked at them for the first time in years. They were middle-aged now, with lines around their eyes and gray in their hair. They'd lived their lives, made their choices, built their families, and now they wanted to rebuild their relationship with me, not because they loved me, but because I had something they wanted. "No," I said quietly. "Mom, don't be ridiculous," Sarah said, her voice taking on that familiar, patronizing tone. "You can't stay here forever. This isn't a real life. It's more real than anything I had with you," I replied, and I saw all 3 of them flinch. "Look, Mom," Michael said, clearly trying to be the voice of reason. "We know we made some mistakes in the past. We know we hurt you, but we're here now, and we want to make things right." "Make things right?" I stood up slowly, my friends at the bridge table watching with interest. "You want to make things right. Where were you when I was learning to play bridge? Where were you when I started the book club? Where were you when I fell in love with Harold? Where were you when I married him or when I buried him?" "Mom, Jessica started. "You were nowhere," I continued, my voice growing stronger with each word. "You were living your busy lives, checking on me once a month like I was some obligation you had to fulfill. You didn't care about my happiness, my well-being, my life. You cared about your convenience. That's not fair," Sarah protested. "Fair?" I laughed, a sound with no humor in it. "You want to talk about fair? Let me tell you what's fair. Fair is leaving me alone to live my life the way I choose. Fair is accepting that I'm happy where I am. Fair is respecting my decisions the way I wish you'd respected me 2 years ago." "But Mom," Michael said, "you could have so much more. You could have your own place, your independence, your family around you." "I have my independence," I said. "I have my family. They're right here in this room, and they're scattered throughout this building. These people know me, value me, care about me. They don't see me as a burden or an obligation or a source of income. they see me as Margaret. The truth of that statement hit me like a lightning bolt. For the first time in my life, I was just Margaret. Not Margaret the mother, not Margaret the caregiver, not Margaret the woman who sacrificed everything for everyone else. Just Margaret, a woman with her own thoughts, her own interests, her own life. "We're your children," Sarah said, her voice breaking slightly. "We're your family." "You're my children," I agreed. "But you haven't been my family for a long time." Family shows up, family cares. Family doesn't abandon you when you need them most and then come crawling back when you have something they want. The silence that followed was deafening. I could see the other residents in the common room trying to pretend they weren't listening, but I didn't care. Let them hear. Let everyone hear. "So, here's what's going to happen," I said, my voice calm and clear. "You're going to leave. You're going to go back to your busy lives and your important obligations. And you're going to leave me alone to live my life the way I choose." "Mom, please," Jessica said, tears streaming down her face. "We love you. We want you back." "You love my money," I corrected. "You want my money back. There's a difference." "That's not true," Michael protested, but his voice lacked conviction. "Isn't it?" I asked. "Tell me, Michael, when's the last time you called me just to see how I was doing? When's the last time you asked about my interests, my friends, my life? When's the last time you treated me like a person instead of a problem to be solved?" He couldn't answer because there was no answer. None of them could. "I think you should go now," I said, sitting back down at the bridge table. "Ruth, whose turn is it?" Ruth, bless her heart, picked up her cards without missing a beat. "I believe it's yours, dear." I heard Sarah's sharp intake of breath, Michael's muttered curse, and Jessica's continued crying. But I didn't look up from my cards. I listened to their footsteps as they walked away, listened to the sound of the door closing behind them, and felt a weight lift from my shoulders that I hadn't even realized I'd been carrying. That night, Ruth and I sat in our room, talking about what had happened. "That was quite a performance," she said with a smile. "How do you feel?" "Free," I said, and I meant it. For the first time in my life, I feel completely free. No regrets. I thought about it for a long moment. I regret that it took me so long to stand up for myself. I regret that I wasted so many years trying to be the perfect mother, the perfect caregiver, the perfect martyr. I regret that I almost missed out on the best years of my life because I was too busy feeling sorry for myself. "And your children? I'll always love them," I said. "They're part of me. But I won't let them define me anymore. I won't let their approval or disapproval determine my worth. I won't let their needs override my own." Ruth nodded approvingly. "Good for you." Over the next few months, my children continued to call, but less frequently and with less enthusiasm. They'd apparently realized that I wasn't going to be swayed by guilt trips or emotional manipulation. Sarah still visited occasionally, but our conversations were stilted and awkward. Michael sent cards on holidays. Jessica stopped calling altogether. I found that I didn't miss them as much as I thought I would. The constant anxiety about their approval, the endless worry about their happiness, the bone-deep exhaustion of always putting their needs before my own, all of that was gone. In its place was a peace I'd never experienced before. I threw myself into life at Sunset Manor with renewed energy. I started a writing group, organized monthly trips to the local theater, and even convinced the administration to let us start a small business selling the vegetables from our garden to local restaurants. I was busier and more fulfilled than I'd been in years. About 6 months after the confrontation in the common room, I was in my room reading when Ruth came bursting in, her face flushed with excitement. "Margaret, you need to see this," she said, shoving a newspaper in my direction. I looked at the business section where she was pointing and felt my heart skip a beat. There, in black and white, was a photograph of Michael standing outside what appeared to be a courthouse, his face grim and his hands cuffed behind his back. "Prominent local businessmen arrested for embezzlement," the headline read. I read the article with growing shock. Michael had been stealing from his company for years, using the money to maintain a lifestyle he couldn't afford. The amount was staggering, over $500,000. He was facing serious jail time. "Oh my God," I whispered. Ruth sat down beside me on the bed. "There's more," she said gently. "I called my niece who works at the courthouse. She says Sarah's going through a nasty divorce. Apparently her husband found out she's been having an affair with her boss, and he's taking her for everything she's worth. And Jessica? Well, Jessica's husband lost his job 3 months ago, and they're about to lose their house." I stared at the newspaper, my mind reeling. All 3 of my children were in serious financial trouble. All 3 of them were facing the kind of crisis that would have sent them running to me in the past, looking for emotional support and, undoubtedly, financial assistance. "What are you going to do?" Ruth asked quietly. I thought about it for a long moment. 2 years ago, I would have been on the phone immediately, offering help, money, a place to stay, whatever they needed. I would have mortgaged my future to save theirs, just like I'd done so many times before. But I wasn't that person anymore. "Nothing," I said finally. "I'm going to do nothing." Ruth raised an eyebrow. "Nothing? They're adults," I said. "They made their choices and now they have to live with the consequences. Just like I had to live with the consequences of their choices when they dumped me here. But they're your children." "Yes, they are, and I love them. But I won't enable them anymore. I won't rescue them from their own bad decisions. I won't sacrifice my peace and happiness to fix their problems." As if summoned by our conversation, my phone rang. It was Sarah. "Mom," her voice was shaky, desperate. I need to talk to you." "What about?" I asked, though I already knew. "Things have been difficult lately. I'm sure you've heard about the divorce. It's been really hard on the kids, and financially, I'm struggling. I was wondering if maybe you could help me out, just until I get back on my feet." There it was, the plea for help, the appeal to my maternal instincts, the assumption that I would drop everything to rescue her from her own mistakes. "I'm sorry to hear about your troubles," I said, and I meant it. "But I can't help you." "It can or won't?" she asked, her voice turning sharp. "Won't," I said honestly. "I won't enable your poor choices anymore, Sarah. I won't sacrifice my financial security for your comfort. I won't go back to being the person who gives and gives and gives until there's nothing left." "I can't believe you're being so selfish," she said, her voice rising. "I'm your daughter. I need help. And I was your mother," I replied. "I needed respect and love and consideration. I needed to be treated like a human being instead of a burden. But you couldn't give me that, could you?" The silence on the other end of the line stretched for a long moment. Then Sarah spoke, her voice small and broken. "Please, Mom. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry for everything. I know we hurt you. I know we were wrong, but please, I'm begging you. I don't have anyone else." For just a moment, I wavered. The sound of my daughter's tears, the desperation in her voice, the maternal instinct that had driven me for so many years, it all threatened to overwhelm my resolve. But then I remembered the look on her face when she told me I was moving to Sunset Manor. I remembered her dismissive attitude at my wedding. I remembered 2 years of feeling abandoned and forgotten. "I'm sorry, Sarah," I said softly. "I truly am, but my answer is no." I hung up the phone and sat in silence for a long time. Ruth reached over and took my hand. "That was hard," she said. "Yes," I agreed. It was, but it was also necessary. Over the next few weeks, the calls continued. Michael called from jail asking me to post bail. Jessica called crying about losing her house, asking if she and her family could move in with me. Even some of the grandchildren called, clearly coached by their parents to appeal to my sympathies. Each call was harder than the last, but I held firm. I learned the difference between loving someone and enabling them, between being a good mother and being a doormat. I'd learned that setting boundaries wasn't selfish, it was necessary for survival. But the real test came about a month later, when all 3 of my children showed up at Sunset Manor together. This time, they looked different. Sarah's perfectly styled hair was unkempt, her designer clothes replaced with bargain store substitutes. Michael looked haggard and thin, the stress of his legal troubles etched in every line of his face. Jessica appeared to have aged 10 years in the past few months, her eyes red-rimmed and desperate. They found me in the garden, tending to the tomatoes that had become my pride and joy. I heard their footsteps on the gravel path, but didn't turn around. "Mom," Sarah said, her voice barely above a whisper, "please, we need to talk." I continued pruning, my hands steady despite the thundering of my heart. "I think we've said everything we need to say." "No," Michael said, his voice cracking. "We haven't. We haven't said we're sorry. We haven't said we were wrong. We haven't said we love you." I finally turned around, and what I saw broke my heart. These weren't the confident, successful adults who'd forced me from my home 2 years ago. These were broken, desperate people who'd finally learned what it felt like to be abandoned. "You're sorry," I said. "You were wrong. You love me. There, I've said it for you. Does that make you feel better?" Jessica stepped forward, tears streaming down her face. "Mom, please. We know we hurt you. We know we were terrible to you. But we're family. We're blood. That has to count for something." "It counted for something when you threw me away like garbage," I replied. "It counted for something when you sold my belongings without asking. It counted for something when you visited me like I was some obligation you had to fulfill. Where was the family loyalty then?" "We were wrong," Sarah said, dropping to her knees in the dirt. "We were so wrong. We were selfish and cruel and ungrateful. We took you for granted, and we hurt you in ways that are unforgivable. But please, Mom, please don't abandon us the way we abandoned you." The sight of my eldest daughter on her knees, begging for my forgiveness, was almost more than I could bear. Every instinct I had screamed at me to help her, to help all of them. But I'd learned to listen to my brain as well as my heart. "Get up, Sarah," I said quietly. "Get up and go home." "We don't have homes," Michael said bitterly. "We don't have anything. We lost it all." "And whose fault is that?" I asked. "Did I make you steal from your company, Michael? Did I make you have an affair, Sarah? Did I make you live beyond your means, Jessica? You made your choices and now you have to live with them." "But we're your children," Jessica sobbed. "We're your babies. You used to say you'd do anything for us." "I did do anything for you," I said, my voice rising. "I sacrificed everything for you. My youth, my dreams, my chances at happiness. I gave you everything I had, and when I had nothing left to give, you threw me away. And now that you need something from me again, you want to play the family card? We're different now," Sarah said, struggling to her feet. "We've learned, we've changed." "Have you?" I asked. "Or are you just desperate? If you won the lottery tomorrow, would you still be here begging for my forgiveness? Or would you go back to your busy lives and forget about me again?" The look that passed between them told me everything I needed to know. They were here because they had nowhere else to go, not because they'd had some great epiphany about family or love or respect. "I want you to leave," I said, turning back to my tomatoes. "I want you to leave and not come back. I want you to stop calling, stop writing, stop sending the grandchildren to manipulate me. I want you to let me live my life in peace." "You can't mean that," Michael said. "I mean every word of it," I replied. "You had your chance to be my family, and you chose not to take it. Now it's too late." "It's never too late," Jessica said desperately. "We can start over. We can be better." "Can you?" I asked, finally turning to face them again. "Can you really? Because I've heard these promises before. Every time you needed something from me, you'd promise to be better, to visit more, to call more often. But the promises never lasted longer than your need." I could see the truth of my words hitting them like physical blows. They knew I was right. They'd made these same promises before, and they'd broken them just as quickly. "This is different," Sarah insisted. "We've lost everything. We understand now what it feels like to be abandoned, to be alone, to have nowhere to turn." "Good," I said, and the harshness in my voice surprised even me. "Maybe now you'll understand what you put me through." I walked past them, heading back toward the building. But Michael grabbed my arm, stopping me. "Mom, please," he said, his voice breaking. "I'm going to prison. I might die there. Do you really want your last memory of me to be this? Do you really want to live with the knowledge that you turned your back on me when I needed you most?" I looked at his hand on my arm, then up at his face. For just a moment I saw the little boy he used to be, the one who would run to me with scraped knees and broken toys, the one who believed his mother could fix anything. But that little boy was gone. In his place was a man who'd stolen from his employers, who'd lied to his family, who'd only come to me when he had nowhere else to turn. "Let go of me," I said quietly. "Mom, let go of me," I repeated, and something in my voice made him drop his hand. "You want to know what I want my last memory to be?" I asked. "I want it to be of Harold and me sitting in this garden, talking about the book we just finished reading. I want it to be of Ruth and me laughing until we cried over some silly joke. I want it to be of feeling useful and valued and loved for who I am, not what I can provide." I started walking again, but this time none of them tried to stop me. "We'll contest the will," Sarah called after me, her voice filled with venom. "We'll prove you're not competent to make these decisions. We'll get what's rightfully ours." I stopped and turned around one last time. "Try it," I said. "I dare you. I'm 75 years old, but I'm sharper than I've ever been. I have an excellent lawyer, and I have documentation of everything you've done to me. Go ahead and try to prove I'm incompetent. Let's see how that works out for you." The look of defeat on their faces was almost satisfying. Almost. I walked away from them that day, and I never looked back. True to their word, they did try to contest Harold's will. They hired a lawyer and filed papers claiming I was suffering from dementia, that I was being manipulated by the staff at Sunset Manor, that I wasn't capable of making sound financial decisions. They painted a picture of a confused old woman being taken advantage of by predatory caregivers, but I was ready for them. I'd been preparing for this fight from the moment I'd refused to help them. I had medical records proving my mental competency. I had testimonials from the staff and residents at Sunset Manor attesting to my involvement in facility activities and my clear thinking. I had documentation of all their visits, all their phone calls, all their attempts to manipulate me into giving them money. Most importantly, I had Harold's son David. who testified that his father had been completely lucid when he'd made his will, that he'd specifically mentioned wanting to provide for me because he knew my own children had abandoned me. The case was dismissed within 6 months. The judge not only ruled in my favor, but also ordered my children to pay my legal fees. It was a final, definitive victory, but it brought me no joy. If anything, it made me sad to realize how far we'd all fallen. After the legal battle ended, I truly did cut all ties with my children. I changed my phone number, blocked their emails, and instructed the staff at Sunset Manor not to allow them on the property. For the first time in my adult life, I was completely free from their drama, their needs, their demands. And you know what? I thrived. Without the constant stress of worrying about my children's approval or their problems, I discovered parts of myself I'd forgotten existed. I started painting again, something I'd given up when they were young because I couldn't afford supplies. I wrote short stories about my experiences, and one of them was even published in a literary magazine. I traveled with Ruth to places I'd always dreamed of seeing but never thought I could afford. I lived, really, truly lived, for the first time in decades. Ruth and I became inseparable. We were like teenagers sometimes, staying up late, talking, giggling over silly things, planning adventures. She was the sister I'd always wanted, the friend I'd never had time for when I was busy being the perfect mother. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked me one evening as we sat in the garden watching the sunset. "Cutting them off completely?" I thought about it, really thought about it. "I regret that it came to that," I said finally. "I regret that they never learned to see me as a person instead of a resource. I regret that I wasted so many years trying to earn their love instead of demanding their respect. But do I regret cutting them off? No. It was the healthiest thing I ever did for myself." "Oh, what if they really change?" she asked. "What if they come back in a few years, genuinely sorry, genuinely different?" "Then I'll consider it," I said. "But they'll have to prove it first. They'll have to show me that they want a relationship with me, not with my money. They'll have to show me that they respect me as a person, not just as their mother. And honestly, Ruth, I don't think they're capable of that kind of change." She nodded thoughtfully. "You're probably right, but at least you're open to the possibility." "I'm open to a lot of possibilities now," I said. "That's the beauty of finally living for yourself. The world opens up in ways you never imagined." Years passed. I heard through the grapevine that Michael had served his time and was working as a night security guard, struggling to rebuild his life. Sarah had moved to a small apartment and was working as a receptionist, her days of luxury long behind her. Jessica had lost her house and was living with her in-laws, her marriage strained to the breaking point. I felt sorry for them, but I didn't feel responsible for their situations. They'd made their choices and they were living with the consequences. It wasn't my job to save them from themselves anymore. On my 80th birthday, Sunset Manor threw me a huge party. The common room was decorated with balloons and streamers, and what felt like half the town showed up to celebrate with me. I had friends from the book club, people from my writing group, staff members who'd become like family, and even some of the local restaurant owners who bought vegetables from our garden. It was the kind of celebration I dreamed of as a child, but never thought I'd have. I was surrounded by people who genuinely cared about me, who appreciated me for who I was, who valued my contributions to their lives. As I looked around the room at all the faces smiling at me, I felt a profound sense of gratitude, not for the money that had given me options, not for the circumstances that had led me to this place, but for the courage I'd finally found to choose myself. "Ruth," now 85 and still my closest friend, stood up to make a toast. "To Margaret," she said, raising her glass of punch, "who taught us all that it's never too late to start living for yourself, who showed us that sometimes the family you choose is more important than the family you're born with, and who proved that the best years of your life can begin whenever you decide to start living them." The room erupted in applause, and I felt tears streaming down my face. But for the first time in years, they were tears of joy, not sorrow. Later that night, as I was getting ready for bed, there was a knock at my door. I opened it to find one of the night staff members holding a large bouquet of flowers. "These were delivered for you," she said with a smile. "Happy birthday, Margaret." I took the flowers, beautiful white roses mixed with baby's breath, and looked for a card. There, tucked between the stems, was a small envelope with my name written in handwriting I didn't recognize. Inside was a simple card with a message that made my heart skip a beat. "Dear Grandmother Margaret, my name is Emma, and I'm Jessica's daughter. I'm 18 now, and I've been thinking about you a lot lately. My mom told me what happened between you and the family, and I want you to know that I don't think it was right. I've been saving money from my job, and I'd like to come visit you sometime if you'd let me. Not because I want anything from you, but because I want to know my grandmother. I graduate high school next month, and I'd love to tell you about my plans for college. I hope you'll give me a chance to show you that not all of us are like our parents. Love, Emma. P.S. I paid for these flowers with my own money." I sat down heavily on my bed, the card trembling in my hands. Emma, Jessica's youngest daughter. The little girl who used to run around the common room during those brief, uncomfortable visits. She was 18 now, an adult, old enough to make her own decisions about who she wanted in her life. Ruth came in and found me sitting there, staring at the card. "What is it?" she asked, concerned. I handed her the card and watched as she read it. Her expression softened. "Oh, Margaret," she said softly, "what are you going to do?" I looked at the flowers, at the card, at the hope and sincerity in a young woman's handwriting. For the first time in years, I felt something I thought I'd lost forever: hope for my family. "I'm going to write her back," I said. "I'm going to tell her she can visit, but just her. Not as a representative of the family, not as a bridge to her parents, but as herself, as Emma." Ruth smiled. "I think that's wise. And who knows? Maybe she really is different." "Maybe," I agreed. "But even if she's not, I'll survive. I've learned that I can survive anything." 3 weeks later, Emma came to visit. She was tall and slender, with her mother's eyes but a warmth that Jessica had never possessed. She brought photo albums from her childhood, stories about school, dreams about her future. She asked me about my life, my interests, my experiences. She treated me like a person, not like a grandmother-shaped obligation. "I want you to know," she said as we sat in the garden, "I'm not here to try to fix things between you and my mom. I'm not here to ask for money or favors or anything like that. I'm here because I want to know you. I want to understand who you are, not who everyone else thinks you should be." Those words, so simple and yet so profound, broke something open in my chest. This young woman, barely 18, understood something that her mother, aunt, and uncle had never grasped: that relationships are built on respect and genuine interest, not on need and obligation. "I'd like that," I said. "I'd like that very much." Emma started visiting regularly. She'd come every few weeks, sometimes bringing friends, sometimes coming alone. She'd help me in the garden, participate in our book club discussions, and even convinced some of the other residents to start a writing workshop where we'd share stories about our lives. Through Emma, I learned that my other grandchildren had been curious about me too, but their parents had forbidden them from reaching out. She told me about family dinners where I was mentioned only in whispers, about the financial struggles they were all still facing, about the way guilt and shame had eaten away at all of them. "Do you think they're really sorry?" I asked her one day. Emma considered the question carefully. "I think they're sorry they got caught," she said finally. "I think they're sorry they lost everything, but I'm not sure they're sorry for how they treated you. I think they still believe they did what was best for you, even if it didn't work out the way they planned." Her honesty was refreshing. She didn't try to paint her mother in a better light or make excuses for the family's behavior. She simply told me the truth, and I appreciated that more than she could know. "What about you?" I asked. "Do you think they did what was best for me?" "No," she said without hesitation. "I think they did what was easiest for them. I think they wanted to put you somewhere where they wouldn't have to worry about you anymore, where someone else would take care of you so they wouldn't have to. I don't think they considered what you wanted or needed or how it would make you feel. Out of the mouths of babes." Emma graduated high school with honors and was accepted to a prestigious college with a full scholarship. I was so proud of her, and I told her so. At her graduation party, which she held at Sunset Manor because she wanted me to be there, I met some of her friends and was struck by how mature and thoughtful they all were. "Your grandmother is so cool," one of them said to her. "I wish my grandparents were like her." "She's pretty amazing," Emma agreed, and the pride in her voice made my heart soar. That summer, before Emma left for college, she asked me a question that caught me off guard. "Grandma Margaret," she said, "do you think you'll ever forgive them? My mom, Uncle Michael, Aunt Sarah?" I thought about it for a long time. Forgiveness was complicated. It wasn't the same as reconciliation, and it wasn't the same as forgetting. It was about letting go of the anger and hurt that had been eating away at me for so long. "I think I already have forgiven them," I said finally. "Not because they deserve it, but because I deserve peace. Carrying around all that anger and hurt was poisoning me. Letting it go was the best gift I could give myself." "But forgiveness doesn't mean you have to let them back into your life," she said, and I was amazed by her wisdom. "No," I agreed. "It doesn't. Forgiveness is about freeing yourself from the past. Trust has to be earned and relationships have to be built on mutual respect. They haven't shown me that they're capable of either." Emma nodded thoughtfully. "I understand, and I want you to know that whatever you decide about them, I'll support you. My relationship with you is separate from all of that family drama." "Thank you," I said, and I meant it. That means more to me than you know. As Emma prepared to leave for college, I made a decision that surprised even me. I called my lawyer and had him draft a new will. I left a substantial portion of my estate to Emma with the stipulation that she couldn't access it until she was 25 and had graduated from college. I left smaller amounts to my other grandchildren, with the same conditions. The rest I left to various charities and to Sunset Manor itself to help fund programs for residents who couldn't afford them. To my 3 children, I left nothing, not out of spite, but out of practicality. They'd proven that they couldn't be trusted with money, and I wasn't going to enable their poor choices even in death. I told Emma about my decision when she came to say goodbye before leaving for college. "I don't want the money," she said immediately. "I don't want you to think that's why I started visiting you." "I know that's not why you started visiting me," I said gently. "That's exactly why you're getting the money. You've shown me that you value me as a person, not as a bank account. You've built a relationship with me based on love and respect, not on need and manipulation. That's the kind of person I want to help succeed in life. But what about my mom and the others? She asked. They're still struggling, and they'll continue to struggle until they learn to make better choices, I said. Giving them money won't solve their problems. It will only enable them to make the same mistakes again. You, on the other hand, have shown me that you have the character and wisdom to use resources responsibly. Emma hugged me tightly. I'll make you proud, she said. You already have, I replied. After Emma left for college, I settled into a new routine. I continued to be active in the facilities programs, maintained my friendships, and kept busy with my various hobbies. I felt more at peace than I had in years. Ruth and I grew even closer, if that was possible. We were like an old married couple, finishing each other's sentences and sharing private jokes. When she was diagnosed with cancer at the age of 87, I was devastated. I'm not ready to lose you, I told her as she lay in the hospital bed. You're not losing me, she said with a weak smile. You're just gaining some peace and quiet. Even facing death, she could make me laugh. Besides, she continued, you don't need me anymore. You've learned to stand on your own 2 feet. You've learned to value yourself. You've learned that you deserve to be treated with respect and kindness. That's all I ever wanted for you. Ruth passed away peacefully in her sleep 2 weeks later. I was holding her hand when she died, and I felt a part of my heart die with her. She'd been more than a friend. She'd been my savior, my teacher, my sister. She'd shown me what it meant to live for yourself, to demand respect, to find joy in the simple things. At her funeral, I was amazed by how many people showed up. Ruth had touched so many lives during her time at Sunset Manor, and it was clear that she'd had the same impact on others that she'd had on me. I spoke at the service, talking about her wisdom, her humor, her unwavering support. Ruth taught me that it's never too late to start living for yourself, I said, looking out at the crowd of mourners. She taught me that the family you choose is often more important than the family you're born with. She taught me that respect is not something you beg for. It's something you demand. And she taught me that the best years of your life can begin whenever you decide to start living them. After the funeral, I felt lost. Ruth had been my anchor, my constant companion, my source of strength. Without her, I wasn't sure who I was anymore. But then I remembered what she'd said in the hospital. I didn't need her anymore. I'd learned to stand on my own 2 feet. I'd learned to value myself. So I did what Ruth would have wanted me to do. I kept living. I kept participating in activities, kept maintaining my friendships, kept finding joy in the simple things. I missed her terribly, but I didn't let her death define me. Emma came home for Ruth's funeral, and we spent several days together talking about life, death, and everything in between. She was flourishing in college, studying journalism, and planning to change the world. Her enthusiasm and optimism reminded me of myself at that age, before life had beaten me down. I want to write your story, she said one evening as we sat in the garden. I want to tell people about what you've been through, how you found the strength to stand up for yourself, how you built a new life at an age when most people think life is over. I don't know if anyone would be interested, I said. Are you kidding? She replied. Your story is incredible. You're like a superhero for older women. You're proof that it's never too late to start living for yourself. The idea intrigued me. Maybe my story could help other women who were in similar situations. Maybe it could inspire them to demand the respect they deserved, to set boundaries with their families, to live for themselves instead of constantly sacrificing for others. Okay, I said, let's do it. So, Emma interviewed me for hours, recording everything on her phone. She asked me about my childhood, my first marriage, raising my children alone. The years of sacrifice and struggle, the day they forced me to move to Sunset Manor, my transformation, my relationship with Harold, my decision to cut ties with my children. What would you say to other women who are in similar situations? She asked during one of our sessions. I thought about it for a long time. I would tell them that they matter, I said finally. I would tell them that their needs and wants and feelings are just as important as anyone else's. I would tell them that it's not selfish to demand respect, to set boundaries, to live for themselves. And I would tell them that it's never too late to start over, to find happiness, to discover who they really are when they're not defined by their relationships to other people. What about forgiveness? She asked. A lot of people would say you should forgive your children, that family is everything. I have forgiven them, I said. But forgiveness doesn't mean you have to continue to allow people to hurt you. It doesn't mean you have to sacrifice your own well-being for theirs. It doesn't mean you have to set yourself on fire to keep them warm. Emma nodded thoughtfully. That's powerful. I think a lot of people need to hear that. I think so too, I agreed. Emma's article was published in a national magazine 6 months later. It was called The Grandmother Who Said No, and it told my story with compassion, honesty, and insight. The response was overwhelming. Letters poured in from women all over the country who had been in similar situations. Some were elderly mothers who had been discarded by their children. Others were younger women who were struggling to set boundaries with demanding family members. All of them thanked me for showing them that it was possible to choose themselves, to demand respect, to live on their own terms. One letter in particular stood out. It was from a woman named Dorothy, who was 78 years old and living in a nursing home in Texas. Her story was almost identical to mine. Children who had forced her from her home, who visited out of obligation rather than love, who saw her as a burden rather than a blessing. Reading your story gave me the courage to stand up for myself, she wrote. I've been miserable for 3 years, but I thought I had to be grateful for whatever scraps of attention my children threw my way. Your story showed me that I deserve better. I'm making changes, and for the first time in years, I feel hopeful about the future. I cried when I read her letter. If my story could help even one person find the courage to value themselves, then everything I'd been through was worth it. The article also caught the attention of a literary agent who contacted Emma about the possibility of turning my story into a book. The idea was both exciting and terrifying. Did I really want to expose my family's dysfunction to the world? Did I want to relive all the pain and heartbreak? But then I thought about Dorothy and all the other women who had written to me. I thought about the potential to help even more people find their own strength and courage. I thought about Ruth, who had always believed that our experiences, both good and bad, were meant to be shared. Let's do it, I told Emma. The book took 2 years to write. Emma interviewed me extensively, and we also spoke with other residents at Sunset Manor, staff members, and even some of the people who had written to me after the article was published. We wanted to show that my story wasn't unique, that there were countless women out there who had been devalued and discarded by their families. The book was published when I was 83 years old. We called it Never Too Late, A Grandmother's Guide to Living for Yourself. It became a bestseller almost immediately, and I found myself in the surreal position of being a minor celebrity. I did interviews on television and radio, speaking to audiences about the importance of self-respect, boundary setting, and living authentically. I spoke at conferences for social workers, at senior centers, at women's groups. Everywhere I went, I met women who had been inspired by my story to make changes in their own lives. The success of the book brought unexpected attention, including from my own children. After years of silence, they suddenly wanted to reconnect. They called the publisher, tried to contact Emma, even showed up at Sunset Manor, demanding to see me. "We're proud of you, Mom," Sarah said when she finally cornered me in the lobby one afternoon. "We always knew you were special. We want to be part of your success." I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw the same calculating expression I'd seen years ago when they'd first learned about my inheritance. They weren't proud of me. They were jealous of my success and looking for a way to profit from it. "No," I said simply. "No," she repeated, as if she'd never heard the word before. "No," I said again. "You don't get to be part of my success. You don't get to claim credit for who I've become. You don't get to waltz back into my life now that I'm successful and pretend that none of the past happened." "But we're family," she protested. "No," I said for the third time. "We're strangers who happen to share DNA. Family is about love, respect, support, and loyalty. You've shown me none of those things. You've shown me that you're interested in me only when I have something you want." I walked away from her that day, just as I had years ago in the garden. But this time, I felt no sadness, no regret, no second-guessing. I felt only a deep, abiding peace. The book's success opened doors I never could have imagined. I was invited to speak at universities, at conferences, at events all over the country. I traveled more in my 80s than I had in my entire previous life. I met fascinating people, saw incredible places, and discovered that the world was full of possibilities even at my age. But the most rewarding part was the impact the book had on others. I received thousands of letters from women who had found the courage to change their lives after reading my story. Some had set boundaries with abusive family members. Others had left toxic relationships. Many had simply learned to value themselves more highly. One letter came from a woman named Patricia, who was 65 years old and had been caring for her demanding, critical mother for 20 years. After reading my book, she had finally put her mother in a care facility and moved to Florida to pursue her dream of becoming an artist. "I spent my whole life trying to earn my mother's approval," she wrote. "I finally realized that I was never going to get it, and that was okay. I don't need her approval to be happy. I just need my own." Another letter came from a 40-year-old woman named Jennifer, who had been supporting her adult children financially for years while they made no effort to become independent. After reading my book, she had cut them off and used the money to go back to school for her master's degree. "I thought I was being a good mother by always rescuing them," she wrote, "but I was actually preventing them from learning to take care of themselves. Your book showed me that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is let people face the consequences of their choices." These letters, hundreds of them, showed me that my story had touched something universal. There were women everywhere who had been taught to put everyone else's needs before their own, who had been conditioned to believe that their own happiness was less important than everyone else's comfort. My book had given them permission to choose themselves, and that was the greatest gift I could have given. Emma graduated from college with honors and went on to become a successful journalist. She continued to visit me regularly, and our relationship deepened over the years. She was the daughter I'd never had, the family member who saw me for who I truly was. "I want you to know," she told me one day, "that you saved my life. I saved your life." I laughed. "How did I do that?" "You showed me what it looks like to respect yourself," she said. "You showed me that I don't have to accept poor treatment from anyone, even family. You showed me that I'm worth fighting for. If you hadn't stood up for yourself, I might have grown up thinking that's just how women are supposed to be treated." I felt tears prick my eyes. And you showed me that not everyone in our family is broken, I said. You showed me that it's possible to love someone without trying to use them. You showed me that I was right to believe in the possibility of genuine relationships. We hugged, and I felt the profound satisfaction of knowing that my story had a happy ending after all. As I sit here now, at the age of 85, I can honestly say that I have no regrets. I regret that it took me so long to learn to value myself, but I don't regret the journey that brought me here. I regret that my relationship with my children couldn't be salvaged, but I don't regret the decision to protect myself from their toxicity. I live in a beautiful apartment now, purchased with the proceeds from my book. I have a housekeeper who comes 3 times a week, a personal assistant who helps me manage my speaking engagements, and a driver who takes me wherever I need to go. I have friends from all over the world, people who respect and admire me for who I am. Most importantly, I have peace. I wake up every morning knowing that I am valued, that I matter, that I am living my life on my own terms. I don't spend my days worrying about what other people think of me or trying to earn anyone's approval. I spend my days doing things that bring me joy, helping other people find their own strength, and appreciating the beauty of a life well lived. If I could go back and talk to my younger self, the woman who was so desperate for her children's love that she would have done anything to get it, I would tell her this: you are enough. You are worthy of love and respect exactly as you are. You don't have to earn anyone's affection by sacrificing yourself. You don't have to set yourself on fire to keep other people warm. And most importantly, it's never too late to start living for yourself. My story isn't unique. There are countless women out there who have been where I was, who are where I was, who will be where I was. Some of them will find the courage to change their lives. Others will continue to sacrifice themselves for people who don't appreciate them. But for those who are ready to choose themselves, who are ready to demand the respect they deserve, who are ready to discover who they really are when they're not defined by their relationships to other people, I want them to know this. It's scary at first. It's hard. It goes against everything we've been taught about what it means to be a good mother, a good daughter, a good woman, but it's also the most liberating, empowering, life-affirming thing you can do. It's the gift you give not just to yourself, but to everyone who truly loves you. Because when you respect yourself, you teach others how to respect you. When you value yourself, you attract people who value you. When you live authentically, you inspire others to do the same. So yes, I was left for dead by my own children. They discarded me like trash, treated me like a burden, and tried to erase me from their lives. But in doing so, they gave me the greatest gift of all. They forced me to find myself. And what I found was worth more than any inheritance, more valuable than any relationship, more precious than any approval. I found Margaret. Not Margaret the mother, not Margaret the caregiver, not Margaret the martyr, but just Margaret. A woman with her own thoughts, her own dreams, her own value. A woman who matters. A woman who is enough. A woman who finally learned to choose herself. And that, dear friends, is how my story ends. Not with my children begging me to come back, but with me realizing I never needed to leave in the first place. I was always enough. I was always worthy. I was always valuable. I just needed to learn to see it for myself.